Okay, let's get started. John, please take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason. Sorry. So it was not that long ago that there was some concern that this conference may not happen at all, actually. Earlier in the year, Cyprus looked to be having rather a massive problem and being a little bit of the scapegoat for the European Union in some respects. But as I travelled here this morning, my taxi driver, and as you do with these sorts of things, you ask the taxi driver what's going on in the local economy. It was his answer that Romanian gypsies were actually far more of a problem locally here in Cyprus than anything in the banking industry, which I was very glad to hear. And I noticed at least 4 foreign exchange brokers or trading operations advertising at the airport. So clearly foreign exchange business is alive and well in Cyprus and has not fallen off a cliff as one might have expected, perhaps. So what I wanted to kick off with here is, perhaps if I start at this end, just quickly down the panel here of your name, the firm that you represent, your title there, and why you came here to the conference today, or your reason for being here at the conference today. So I'll start with you, Pavlos.
Thank you. Maybe I didn't. Okay, I can hear. A friend has told me to always sit second in the panel. So, but I fell in a trap. There's nobody sitting next to me. So, my name is Pampos Panayiotou. I'm representing Trading Point of Financial Instruments, which is branded as XC Markets, and it's a foreign exchange broker. I'm here because I got invited, and I find the subject quite relevant and challenging, and it's good that we open the subject up and discuss it openly here.
Yeah, my name is Johnny. You don't want to know my second name because it's a bit difficult. I am the managing director of Funzel Brokers. I came here to meet friends, to see the industry, what's new, and what probably one of the biggest exhibitions worldwide.
Hello, I'm Glenn Stevens, CEO of Gain Capital. I came because Michael Greenberg says if you don't, then he writes slanderous comments for 6 months. So it's a 6-month trade-off for showing up on a panel. But other than that, it's actually a good gathering of our industry.
My name is Daniel Skoronsky. I'm the CEO of Alpari. I as well know Michael very well, and I kind of use that influence because we have a good friendship as well. And I just make sure I got on every panel that Glenn is on so I can give him a hard time.
My name is Stavros Kajikyriakou. I represent TTCM Traders Trust. I'm the CEO. I've been involved in the financial services industry and in particular the forex market for the last 24 years out of Cyprus. And I'm really glad that we have reached this stage that Cyprus is becoming a forex hub. And we will wait until we get our turn to discuss a bit further about the industry.
Right, okay, so let's crack on with that then. I imagine that there are probably some questions from the audience for this panel as well, or I would hope so. So rather than leaving those to the end, if you do have one or want to respond to something that someone has said, and it is actually a question, raise your hand. Let's get that going here as well. I think the big question is, where's the money, right? Where is the money? So we have 3 Cyprus-based brokers, and we have 2 non-Cyprus-based brokers, one of which who used to have an operation here. My love of billboards, there was an advertising campaign a little earlier in the year. Your money is safe with us because we're not in Cyprus, is one that was out there for a little bit. So to my Cypriot-based brokers, how much money or how much client money was actually ever in Cyprus, and was it ever actually affected by what happened? Any of you? Yep.
Well, I think I will change the question a bit. Is how much money you had in the two troubled banks? Because it's not about Cyprus and whether you had money in Cyprus or not. Because if you had money in Cyprus and you had it in safe banks, that not part of the two troubled banks, then you are fine. Yes, we did face a couple of weeks of restrictions, but now we are free to transfer funds and the money is safe. And I will ask another question for the same question. If a broker who was based in the UK or Russia or anywhere else in the world and had money in the same two troubled banks, what would have happened? The same story.
Ramos?
Well, I completely agree with Johnny. The issue is, I think, is quite deeper. These are all foreign exchange brokers are regulated. Let's talk about the Cypriot ones, and they have fiduciary responsibilities against their clients. And part of their fiduciary responsibility is to diversify the client money and to make sure that they are kept safely in highly rated banks. So the issue here is, while the ratings of the two local banks were falling and they became unrated or let's say junk rated, at that point it's very important to make sure that at least most of the money should not be in those two banks, and definitely there should be diversification exercises in place to make sure, even and now after what happened here, which could have happened in other jurisdictions as well, it comes to let's say what we can learn out of this is that we need to diversify even between countries after what happened in Cyprus. It's very important, not only financial institutions diversification.
Stavros, anything to add on that one? Or?
Yes, what I would like to add is the fact that once we were hearing about the banking problem, a lot of brokers have moved their money abroad to many other banks. Also, the regulation was obliging brokers to distribute their money, the clients' money, into different banks. So I don't think clients' money have been affected with this situation to the extent that we have brokers going bankrupt or cannot really face their obligations against their clients.
So you raise a good issue there. Of, you could argue perhaps that the Swiss brought in fairly heavy regulation a few years back, and that meant an exit from Switzerland of a number of brokers, and a number of them came here to Cyprus. And as a result of this crisis, that perhaps there will be some Cyprus-based brokers who will move elsewhere as a result of that, perhaps from a business point of view. I'm coming to you too, but of the three of you, do you think any Cyprus, current Cyprus-based ones would move offshore?
Well, first of all, Cyprus is a good jurisdiction, and the benefits of the European passporting still remains, and it's expected to remain. I mean, there's no reason for anybody to be afraid that the passporting will not be there in the future. So I think that's the main reason for many coming to Cyprus. It's the low tax environment, beneficial tax environment, good services, quality services, very, very good qualified people who can be approved to be part of the management of those firms. So there is lots of reasons. The only thing that has changed after the recent crisis is the tax rate from 10% corporate tax rate to 12.5%. The dividend benefits with regards to dividends is still there. Double tax treaties are still there, and they are there to remain. So I think the general environment has not changed after the crisis. And what really happened, it's a banking crisis in Cyprus. And we all hope that with all the new memorandum that has been agreed, if it's followed correctly, we don't expect to see anything worsening in the future.
I don't believe that we want to have an outflow of brokers. On the contrary, from what I understand, and I'm sure the president of CISEC has confirmed that, we have seen an increasing interest after what has happened in March with companies that they still want to establish to Cyprus. And even though we are concerning about forex brokers, we have to mention also the fact that Cyprus is becoming a specific binary option hub. It really helps the industry and it attracts the interest of more binary as well as forex companies to come and regulate over here.
Okay, maybe you've been reading my questions here. Hang on, I haven't got to that one yet. But okay, so it is, okay, there's a question in the back, that's good. Are binary options the savior of Cyprus, do you think?
I would like to comment on the previous question and then go into this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think there will be outflow of financial firms from Cyprus, but not because of the crisis. We will have the same thing what happened in the States and the same thing what happened in Switzerland by January 2014 when the new European regulations will be implemented here, if this is implemented in 2014. But we will also have an inflow of financial firms, more stable ones, that will adopt these new regulations because of what our colleagues here in France said of the tax haven, the location of Cyprus, geographical location, the infrastructure that we have, the human resource that we have. So there will be, I believe, a plenty of change in the coming year. But again, it's nothing to do with the crisis. It's rather to do with the change of the regulations that's coming over to Europe.
I'm not part of the Cyprus Broker Club, but if I may.
No, but you're heavily regulated though, right? So, yeah.
Correct, but I am part of the heavily regulated club. I think, Johnny, you make a very valid point. I would look to a place like Bermuda. So if you look at Bermuda and you look at its tax haven status and you look at its location geographically and you look at a lot of the advantageous aspects of that infrastructure, that's what makes it so interesting for insurance companies. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, when you try to find qualified people in this industry, whether they be FX or binaries or what have you, it's almost impossible to find anything, or anybody. You have to end up importing them. Same thing for Cayman. So I would argue, to your point, that with the increased regulations and the kind of enhanced infrastructure of Cyprus understanding this product, it's true. You land in the airport, you see a bunch of billboards, people totally get this business. It does actually position itself, I actually think it actually could be a positive with stronger regulation because more global companies will feel more comfortable coming here, and having so many people that are well versed in this business and having a bunch of ancillary companies that support binaries, support whatever it is, it could be that kind of a growth industry where people say, hey, it's a great place. If anybody has seen the expenses to run a business in London or the expenses to run the business in New York, it actually is it's a good idea to have a group of people that you could, as a talent pool, you can draw on. And again, from firsthand experience, you go into a place like Bermuda that has a lot of similarities to Cyprus, but doesn't have the trained people, and it ends up not attracting any FX players. There's very few that are there other than for a very specific purpose. I guess the last piece that I would add is that the one thing unique about FX, and I think to some degree binaries, is that this is a very big white label business. And so when you say, is somebody going to be there in Cyprus, what does that mean? Does that mean they actually have an operation? Does it mean they have a hub? Does it mean it's a global company? Or does it mean it's a local company that's a representation or representative white label office of a global company? So there's kind of two ways to be here, right? You can be here yourselves with your own brand, or you can be here vicariously through a partner, and they can be more locally received, if you will. So that's unique to our business, is that you can actually have a presence in a company under your own brand or not your own brand. So it doesn't make it so obvious whether you have an exodus or an introduction. It's kind of how they're structured as well.
Well, you've been quite busy on the M&A side of things recently, right? Would you buy a broker in Cyprus, or would your shareholders have any objection, do you think, with buying a couple of brokers here?
I think what people forget is that 4 years ago, around 2008, fourth quarter of 2008, I remember, now this is kind of kind of maybe an American wives' tale, but where would a grandmother want to keep their money? In a mattress, right? And I remember driving to work one morning, and I called the CFO, and there was all kinds of issues with solvency of banks. I don't have to remind people about Bear Stearns and Lehman and TARP money being bailed out, billions of dollars being funneled into AIG and JP Morgan and all these places. And I said to my CFO, hey, do me a favor and stop by Sleepy's. And Sleepy's is a really big bed store. And, you know, he thinks I'm drunk in the morning or something because he says, why am I stopping at Sleepy's? And I said, get a couple of king-size mattresses because we can't put any more money in the banks because our risk committee has said that you have to have a certain amount of exposure in each financial institution. We couldn't find any U.S. financial institutions where we could feel comfortable putting our money. So it's interesting that this happens in Cyprus, and everybody says, oh gosh, this is really a Cypriot kind of based thing. It happened in the U.S. 4 years ago where nobody would put money in a very large money center bank. So it's a cyclical thing when banks get over their skis. And I'd say the only country that never gets mentioned, that never gets any credit either, are the Canadian banks, because all they did was look at everybody else getting crazy. And I can tell you that the Canadian executives were fuming at the regulators saying, you're leaving us out of this party, why can't we get involved? And it's only until the party ended badly that they said that's why we're Canadian. But the point is that with this scenario, people have short memories. So would we come back in? Absolutely. I don't even say back in the first time or in. Absolutely, but you do it under a risk diversified measure. You mentioned it, Bambos, earlier. You can't put your eggs in one basket. You have to be diversified. You have to be well capitalized. But again, Cyprus is a hub. Cyprus has a lot of vibrancy when it comes to FX and related products. But I think that global players can be attracted to it under the right circumstances.
Okay, so I'm aware we've got a couple of questions, but a question for Dan first before we do that. So just coming back to this one, your money is safe with us because we're not based in Cyprus. Now, that wasn't your firm.
Certainly not.
No, just make that quite clear. That was allegedly by a firm registered in the British Virgin Islands, and a similar sort of advertising campaign from another broker, which is regulated by Russian FMRRC. My question, though, is surely this has been a bit of a boon for you guys, right? Anyone who did have an account in a Cyprus-based broker, I've got to imagine a lot of them shifted and moved to both of your firms, plus a couple of others that are here today. Is that true, or is that just sort of, no, we didn't really see that at all?
Well, I think it's kind of important for me to kind of lay a little bit background because Alpari, we were kind of fortunate to pull out of Cyprus actually a few weeks before the crisis hit. And I'd love to tell you the sexy story that we were tipped off or that we knew something and we were able to get out. But the fact of the matter is it was more of a strategic one. We actually came to Cyprus in 2010. It was mainly for strategic reasons. We were able to help kind of focus on our client base out of the Middle East. Our Russian entity was trying to do more business through the Cyprus entity that had better regulation. Again, there's a huge wealth of talent that was there, which is also kind of rare to find in such a cluster, which again was, I think, more of this movement from Switzerland over into Cyprus. And the fact of the matter was, it was a EU-regulated company that was very similar to our financial service authority in the UK. Last year, we all know that it was a tough time for all forex brokers in this business. The volatility was very low, and I recently actually took over as CEO in October of last year, and we kind of looked at everything, and it was basically simply a cost-cutting measure. We did have a lot of our clients were based in Cyprus. The regulations were very similar to the FSA in the UK, and when we looked at everything, it just didn't really make sense for us to have that full operation. There was too much cross-selling going on, and there was some confusion between brands, and we named it Alpari Financial Services for some specific reasons. And we just decided, let's run everything out of the UK. It was much more consolidated. So again, I'd love to say that we saw this foresight and looked into the crystal ball and knew something was coming, but we just didn't. We did it for strategy reasons. As far as seeing what impact this had after this crisis happened, yeah, absolutely. We saw a lot of clients come into our UK operation from Cyprus. And I think it was, that first few weeks that really where people didn't know anything. Brokers were going down, banks were collapsing, Italy's next, Spain's next, Greece is in trouble. It's Germany leaving the EU. I think there's just so much confusion that I think, look, if I looked at myself as an individual investor, would I want to stay there? And the question to myself was no, and I told all my team, I said, what are we going to do here? We had our presence there before. We need to somehow rest assured those people who are going to move. And, actually this only really happened for about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most, but pretty much things have gone back to normal. I think things have settled down. People realized, that it's not the end of the world. And again, I think that Cyprus is different because there's such this built-up infrastructure of forex. I would probably say Cyprus is probably the second country that really understands forex next to Japan. So Japan and Cyprus, I think, really have that talent pool and understanding of forex. So I think we talked about binaries as well, and that's been a whole new product that's really exploded over the last couple of years. And there's guys like now with Gain that has GFT, they've got some binaries, and Saxo has binaries, and some of the bigger names. And then of course you got brokers like Bank the Binary and 24 Option out there. They've really started to come in and bring this into a new market space, and specifically within Cyprus. And I kind of have to give my tip my hat to the Cyprus authorities, where they have this vision to legitimize and regulate binaries, because this has been a product that's just been cowboying all over the world, right? And Japan's kind of gone total US, completely the opposite way, hitting a product that was actually quite successful, and I think is really good for beginner traders, and they've just kind of decimated the whole market in Japan. But I think Cyprus, that's another chance for them to kind of embrace this, and it's not just forex, but it's binaries. And look, the economy is very strong here. I know some of the hotels. They're like the London, I think it's called the FX Hotel here. And, it's here to stay. I don't think it's going anywhere. And we're happy that we've got a number of clients here. We have great relationships here. And, we'll continue to support Cyprus any way we can, even if it is just from the UK.
Okay, so I think there are 2 people with mics in the audience, right? We have... No, we don't? Oh, okay. There was a hand up right at the back, and then there was one in the middle there somewhere, unless they've gone a bit shy. No? No questions? All right. Oh, there we go. We got one.
As is pretty clear in speaking with some of you there that there's a bank crisis and not necessarily an FX crisis that's happened here in Cyprus. With the inevitable or has already happened, job loss, unemployment that will come from the banking sector, is there any resources or operational assets that you might be able to use, take advantage of, or maybe hire some of these people back in the future?
You're not here.
Oh, okay. Not yet. Not yet.
You can't have him.
No, I was just going to say, I think you're making my point. That's one of the reasons I will say, as a negative for Cyprus, it's a hell of a time coming here from New York. But one of the reasons that it is interesting is because of the talent pool. And I think that its proximity to so many markets, and with the MiFID passport built in, I do think that, I know our company included, are absolutely looking at the talent pool here and saying, gee, it makes sense, because on a comparative basis, you have educated, talented, industry understanding people that frankly will be looking for work. And so, yeah, I think if you are betting on the market growing, improving, or yourself as a company growing and improving, then the talent pool here is certainly worth considering. And as I said, we looked at Bermuda, we looked at the Caymans. You can't find anybody that are. I mean, and that doesn't mean they don't have other financial strengths, because if you're an insurance company or you're a trust company, different places have these niche, networks of employees or talent pool. And so, yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for somebody if they want to expand in that respect. That wasn't bad, right?
Yeah, I wanted to answer the same thing, actually. It's unfortunate for those who lost their jobs, of course, but it's also a positive for us, because we can recruit the best. And there is the best in Cyprus. We have very good human resource, very qualified, And I believe it will be an opportunity for those who are based in Cyprus and or those who are coming to Cyprus in the future.
And also as the market becomes more and more competitive, the salaries part is becoming quite important, and that's where Cyprus becomes competitive if we compare it with other jurisdictions, in the sense that you can really get very, very good quality people, qualified, and at a very good cost.
I didn't want to say this now because I have a number of my employees here, then they'll be worried.
And I think every company has to balance between the perceived reputation of the regulator and how cost effective the company can really operate. And that's because it's really becoming a very competitive market. Over the next years, we expect the competition to be increased. That's why Cyprus, if we manage to overcome the current obstacles, and we really feel it's temporary, because at the end of the day, we have to ask, and I've been asking people or finding out which brokers have lost money for their clients, and I haven't found a single one. And I think that's what counts, really. And that would, the impact is definitely negative for the Cyprus brokers. The question here is, what is the impact, and is it temporary or permanent? What we understand is temporary, and the impact is not that significant. And to an extent that we don't really realize the fluctuation in the business, where it really comes from, because it can come from a number of reasons. So I don't feel that is really the outcome for Cyprus brokers is, I feel it's positive, and I don't think bigger problems coming for Cyprus.
If I may add something, if we want to go back to the main question of this discussion panel, which is, can Cyprus forex brokers compete on a global landscape, then my assumption and my answer to the audience is yes, definitely Cyprus forex brokers can compete on a global landscape, provided they are left alone to compete on a fair basis. This I wanted to point out, and I will explain why. I think Cyprus in the last 5 years has started becoming a very noticeable forex hub. Before even the incidents that happened 2 months ago, we were receiving, let's say, from well-developed and regulated jurisdictions, from some brokers, some negative comments. I have something that I would like to read, and then we can discuss it. So it's really sad to see comments like the following. This comes from a website, actually, of a regulated broker from a well-developed jurisdiction, advising clients 8 things to know about forex brokers. Then, among the 8 things, obviously they're mentioning transaction costs, price improvements, execution, field speed, trading tools, spreads, and trust. Then, there is one particular point about security where they mention the following. Can you point to Cyprus on a map? Do you know who is regulating traders in that third world country, promising unbelievable leverage? Before you place your hard-earned money with a broker, you should make sure it's going to a well-regulated market, not a country where trading is still a bit of a Wild West show. I think such an unfair comments really makes us, as local forex brokers, feel sad and feel that we are competing in a very unfair world, under very unfair and uncompetitive competition.
That sounds like a Wild West broker somewhere in the world, right? But it raises a good point, though. So, for instance, you two guys here, big global operations, offices around the world, very large number of accounts, but also a large sales force, etc., a large number of people. How does a Cyprus-based broker compete with that? How does it? It's a big global market. The customers are everywhere. These guys have got a lot of resource, a lot of spend. How do you compete with that?
Okay, we can compete. We can definitely compete if they leave us alone. If we don't read such negative comments,
All right? Yeah.
we have the.
Glenn, Dan, leave them alone. Come on.
I think Cyprus has the right ingredients. We have a good infrastructure. We have a good tax regime. We have the human, a very talented and skillful, educated human resource. If we left alone, we can compete with the rest. I mean, we are talking about a huge 4 trillion daily transaction market. So everyone can compete and everyone can have a small piece of that pie. So
if I may disagree just for a second, I think that this market, above all others, is extremely global. And that seems like a stupidly obvious statement. But what I mean is, if you look at the movement or the shift of companies, Gain, for example, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, had north of 80% of our customer volume and revenue come out of the US. Now that number is more like 23%. If you look at some of the larger Japanese brokers, some of the larger UK brokers, take any one of these markets. I don't think Cyprus is any different from the UK, Japan, the US, pick Australia, pick any of these, Canada, pick any of these local markets. I think as a company, this isn't about being a Cypriot company or a US company or a Russian company or a UK company. I think it has to do with the company. Take the country out. And what you do is you look to see what skills you have developed, either technology, service, risk management, marketing, skilled marketing, and you leverage that, learn about another market, and leverage that outside the market you're in. And then that's how you get market share. And I think ultimately, more than any other market, back to my painfully obvious statement, this is a global market. And if you apply things like skillful marketing, exemplary service, treating your customers fairly, forget about regulators. The reality is you should be able to replicate some of your success. Now, that said, there are certain markets that are very resistant to change. Before we got into Japan, we had 2 white labels in Japan that used our platform in a Japanese language with a local brand. They charged a commission. This was only 5 years ago, 6 years ago. They charged a commission on top of our normal spreads. Yet our platform was available to these exact same customers. It blew my mind that 10-to-1 volume that would happen on the local platform than our platform. I couldn't understand how many local customers would actually pay a PIP commission through this white label instead of using our platform for no commission at all, because there was a local loyalty to it. And then at some point that turned, and the Japanese market became hyper-competitive, and everybody started to say, well, I'd like to deal with a local provider, but ultimately I have to go after price, I have to go after service, I have to go after quality of execution. I think if you're saying, and I don't mean to start a fight here, but if you're saying, leave you alone, my answer would be only if you compete at a high level. And I think that you have an advantage in the Cypriot market by being here already and by people trusting you and knowing who you are and your skilled marketing. But I think if your product is not as good as a global provider, then it's a matter of time that you'll lose out. So I think that's the only way to go.
I agree with you.
Can I just add as a non-broker here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, look, I completely agree with Glenn, and I think I'll touch a little bit on the regulation side as well. I actually think there is a difference between being regulated here in Cyprus than, say, being regulated in the UK or in the US or in the Japan, which has a lot more history, a lot more long-standing in terms of regulation, in terms of trust from a global point of view. So, we're competing, and one of the reasons we have so many offices around the world is we're going local, right? We're putting an office in that space to be able to become that local. And I think Glenn's perfectly said it with Japan, is that Japanese want to sit with a Japanese broker. Now, obviously, regulations now force people to have an office in Japan. But, I don't think Alpari could have competed outside of that. We actually, before we actually did the office, we had a very small representation in Japan. And again, with Cyprus, this is still a very new jurisdiction. It's only, maybe in the last, 4 years, 5 years, that this has really become a country that's been put on the map because of forex. At least that's in my opinion. And the other thing is I couldn't agree with Mark Glenn. It's more about your marketing and the people that you have that's out there and your skill set and your platform and the technology and what you can offer to your customer. This is a global market. It's not a Cyprus market. It's not a UK market. It helps to have that presence in that jurisdiction, but it's certainly not necessary. I can't say that I'm going to compete in gosh, I'm trying to think of where I don't have an office. China. Well, I guess I do have an office in China. Indonesia, right? I don't have an office in Indonesia. Okay, it's very hard for me.
In Cyprus?
Well, we did, but look, Cypriot community is not trading FX, right? That's a fact. It's very, very tiny, right? You're looking at countries, that got at least 30 million plus, 80 million, 100 million, 200 million, a billion. Okay, you need to have a presence there to be able to compete in today's global market, and not only that, you need to have the product. You need to have the people. So do I want to leave the Cypriot broker alone? No, but I challenge them to be there on the same level. Look, I think probably a good example that I'm looking at now is, Alpari's looking at China very closely, and we were in there very strongly about 3 or 4 years ago, and we kind of backed off. Obviously we saw what happened with GAIN and the regulatory agency there, and we didn't want to start having problems there, and we backed off a little bit, and over the last few years, we've kind of left China alone for the most part. But we're going to be going back over in that area. And I look at somebody like Iron FX. Where were they a couple of years ago? Where are their main focus? I think it's mostly China and Middle East. And that's what they're doing. They're putting a product out there that's the Chinese like, that the quality is there. They're doing a great job of marketing. And suddenly they've come out of nowhere, and I think they're one of the stronger brands that's in China. So can a Cypriot broker compete? Absolutely. It's really about the people and the team you have.
I mean, INFX was one of the ones advertising at the airport this morning. Very, very impressive.
They're a little aggressive, I have to admit, and I don't think we would go as aggressive as they are. But the point is, they are competing.
Yep.
So
if I can comment on this, I agree again as well. It's about your product, about the quality of the service that you do offer. And this is a global market. You can compete anywhere. I've been here 25 years, or Windsor Brokers has been 25 years, when there was hardly any regulations. And I remember 7, 8 years ago when I went to China to an exhibition, and I was trying to promote there, and they said to me, "Where is your company based?" I said, "Cyprus." He said, "Cyprus? Where is Cyprus?" And I tried to say Greece, Southern Europe, and so on. What's the population of Cyprus? 750,000. Everybody was shocked. It's like one area in Shanghai or something. But we managed to get clients.
I guess the sort of, does this mean a sort of, predominantly though, perhaps short term, a return to more of a local market, Eastern Europe, Middle East, countries or areas that are comfortable with Cyprus, have a relationship with Cyprus in other ways anyway, and that's possibly more of the home market for Cypriot brokers while this kind of blows over, and then there's a return to being a bigger operations, big global operations. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I believe the forex market is a global market, and it's an online market first of all. And there is the physical location is not that important. It's important when you need to travel and to establish relationships with associates and to get to know the markets. But it is a global market, and it's and Cyprus. I think brokers will want to compete globally. The difficulty, if we take the competing against brokers in AAA countries or more established regulatory environment, I'm sure there are ways to try to at least limit, let's say, this disadvantage. First of all, it's a newly established market in Cyprus, so over time it will gain its trust. And second of all, there are ways to show, to there are ways for the companies to show who they are, to show more transparency, to make sure they gain the confidence of their clients. And it's very important that we've experienced in several occasions that clients really cannot separate between a AAA country and a company established in that AAA country. And many companies are hiding behind the status of their countries. The case with clients, forex brokers clients, is that they want a fair dealing with their brokers, a good relationship, good service, and what they are looking is safety for their funds. Safety for their funds in a European Union in a single market can be obtained by making sure you diversify client funds and you place them where you would put also your money and not chasing high interest rates. So this can be attained when you are established in Cyprus. So it's just that some companies are their competitors, or even just by human nature, people believe or they associate the brokers, the quality of the broker, with the quality of the country. And that's not truth.
Dodgy brokers are everywhere, right?
Well, we've seen examples. The Madoff case, 50 billion got lost in the US.
I think it also depends on the client. In other words, we keep using clients as a very inclusive word. And I tend to look at clients in three segments, if you will. There's kind of the small retail client, call it, pick a number, sub 5,000, sub 25,000. And there's kind of a mid-tier client that's 25,000 up to low seven figures, and there's almost a quasi-institutional client. And I don't think you lump them all together on how they think and how they get treated. I would say that the real small client who's opening up with $1,000 is probably less worried about safety of funds because it's $1,000, and he's looking more about saying, where can I get the most bang for my buck because I want to make a lot of money. And so now he may look to leverage opportunities, he may look to product opportunities, he may look to the slickness of the tools that you offer, and I think that's where you start to transcend the regions because it's all online marketing. And there, if you can be well represented and have local service or local language, what have you, as Dan was referring to before, that helps. But I think it's about a low-touch, high-efficiency operation. And then when you have lower-cost labor in Cyprus, or you have opportunities to lower your cost, because you're at low touch, your margins are lower, you have to be able to do things very efficiently. However, when you go to a mid-tier customer that's higher touch, and someone comes in with 7 figures, then you can actually make the numbers work with higher touch, and then to some degree I might argue that a Cyprus broker would be at a disadvantage because you have to be in the UK market, or you have to be in the Swiss market where you need to be able to see these customers regularly, or you have to do a higher relationship management component. And so I think it starts to break down a little bit when you actually look at the customer segments, whether it be a small customer who's got to be low touch, high service, low margin, high volume, or it's got to be a higher customer who's going to be higher touch, but with higher margin potential, and you can invest more in it, and you can be more local. And look at the Middle Eastern market. You have a lot of high-touch, high-volume, high-profile customers that want local representation, and I think we're a perfect example, Gain is, of going into a market that we were probably too lightly occupying that market to be able to get that high touch and get that high comfort. But in other markets like China, where we started 02, 03, we were pretty low touch, and we were able to get to a lot of customers very quickly. So I think that it depends a little bit, whether it's Cyprus broker, any local broker versus global broker, the type of client matters too, you know, kind of where they slot in. It's not one size fits all.
What's the best kind of customer? The middle one?
The best kind of customer, that's a great question. The best kind of customer is the one you're set up to deal with. I think when you see people get out of their comfort zone, and you see companies that are in the high-touch business, and they try to go mass scale, and they piss away money on the marketing side, or they open up branches all over the world and it doesn't work, or they think they can replicate that model because they were really good with a great branch manager or a great local hero that's followed very well in whatever market it might be. And I think those markets, if you look at a great example is a Japanese company called Rakuten. It's Rakuten. I'm not doing a commercial for them because I don't have anything to do with them. But the point is, they are an e-commerce business, nothing to do with FX. But they went after a very small customer in a very gamey, marketing, low-touch way, and were very successful. but they completely suck at big customers. So there's an example of a skill set that I think matches. So for us, we try to establish a mix, you know, and with the GFT acquisition, they had better success in that kind of higher touch customer, so it's a good complement to what we have. But I think you have to either know your skill set or acquire a skill set for a different customer set.
So I've just returned from New Zealand to come here today. And the New Zealand regulator, the Financial Markets Authority, says that it's establishing stricter operating practices for online trading companies registered in New Zealand. And for translation, that means New Zealand's worked out that they don't know what they're doing when it comes to FX brokers who are popping up all over the place, and realize that they better get around to doing something about it. My question, though, is there anything that regulator could learn from the Cyprus crisis situation? And or if you were setting up your brokerage today, would you be doing it in New Zealand or would you be doing it in Cyprus?
Well, actually, we do have an operation in New Zealand.
You have an office there? Yeah.
Which we're actually going to be, I believe, moving out of as well, right? You know,
Does that mean New Zealand's about to cave in as well?
Look, did you get tipped off again, Dan?
We did. So, look, I would love to sit here and say that I think a regulatory body could learn from other ones, but I think history shows that they don't share information. They don't usually use common sense and look at each other and try to learn things. So I really think we have some doubts on what New Zealand's going to put out there that's really going to be anything, you know, either remotely positive or something that will actually create maybe a Cyprus on that part of the world. So, you know, it's another reason why we're just looking to you know, move away from that jurisdiction. You know, I think New Zealand was good for a certain time in a certain class at that moment, but you know, it is good that they're starting to look up and see, and we need regulatory bodies to kind of step up because, you know, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of dodgy brokers out there. There's still a lot of dodgy business. There's still a lot of dodgy funds that are doing this. And look, we want to be legitimate out here, you know, just as much as the Cyprus brokers or brokers that are sitting in British Virgin Islands or in the U.S. or UK. But there's still stuff going on all over. But to actually think that any of the regulatory bodies are going to actually work together and come to a coalition of some sort, I think, you know, we're not living in that world, unfortunately.
And mentioning about New Zealand, I don't think we can compare an orange with an apple, because from my understanding, you can set up a regulated brokerage firm in New Zealand, and the only requirement is to have 2 local directors or a small office amounting to a maximum $30,000 cost, and then you are free to do whatever you like. So we are not talking about the same thing.
Although it is an island with not a lot of people. So
yeah, the weather's not quite as nice at this time of year, though. So I believe we're getting the hurry it up message. Perhaps if we go back down the line here as we started with, will you be here next year? And do you think this conference will be bigger next year than this year?
We hope so. We will definitely be here because our money are not held in the Bank of Cyprus and Lagi Bank. And we hope you will invite us again and we can share the same discussion next year and see what happened since we left the panel.
Yeah, we've been here for 25 years. We're not going to go anywhere, but doesn't mean that we will not have a branch or a subsidiary somewhere else. But I believe it's going to expand here anyway. As I said, with the new regulations, there will be outflow of some companies and inflow of other companies, and Cyprus will be more of a well-structured financial center. This is how I see it for the next 5 years.
This is my first visit to Cyprus, and some of my team that's here as well. And I guess I would say, without being patronizing, that there's enough pride in this country. You can tell that to get through a rough patch. So I would expect to be back here, maybe in a more meaningful way. But we'll figure that out as we learn more about this market.
I mean, to be frank, I actually didn't really look at this as a Cyprus event. I looked at this as a global forex event. And I think, you know, with the attendance of all the people here, it's not just the Cyprus brokers, it's the entire collective community. And so, you know, you can just look at that as that really all the forex brokers are actually supporting you, supporting Cyprus. So absolutely, Alpari will be here and we'll be here to stay. Not physically, though.
If I may borrow your opening words, your doubts and concern whether this IFX Expo was going to take place this year, I'm really glad to see and say that it has been a success. And I think next year it will be even better. So we have to think positive, we have to fight, we have to face all difficulties, and I'm sure we're here to stay.
So my taxi driver was correct then. The biggest issue facing Cyprus is Romanian gypsies, right?
Well done.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank our panel.